Hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk a little bit about ALGO and what some of our models have been making of its recent price action. So ALGO has gone on a bit of a tear in this run that crypto has been having more generally. I'm going to flip over here to our dashboard view where we can see that ALGO is up. Here we go. About 43% in the last 30 days, and it's up about 6% in the last 7 days. So not really blowing anything out of the water the last 7 days, but a pretty decent move over the last month. Now, I should say before I get into things too far, highly recommend you go check out our website that we just launched in collaboration with Jay over at Daily Crypto Analysis, claritydigital.io. I'll have a link in the description. It's currently in a beta phase. We're kind of making sure we can fix any kind of remaining little issues or bugs before going to the full official launch. And while we're in this beta phase, it is completely free to access. So you can just go over to claritydigital.io, totally free to get in, check it out, start poking around. And we have on this dashboard page, we have output from a lot of the models that you will have seen on this channel in the past. Our upside downside potential indicator, or UDPI, that's our risk model that we created here at Upside Down Data. We have the momentum bias indicator, the trend confidence indicator, the market direction classifier. You'll be able to get live current levels of all those models on this dashboard page, including for assets like ALGO, which I want to focus on today. So the thing that's notable about ALGO to some extent, so I've sorted the dashboard based on the short-term UDPI. And talking about these kind of shorter-term rallies, I think the short-term UDPI is probably the most useful one to be looking at to get a sense of how much further can an asset be, plausibly expected to run in a given point in time. And so I've sorted it to show the lowest first, and then lowest down all the way down here to highest. And what you'll notice is that ALGO, it's not the lowest, right? The lowest here is XRP, followed fairly close after that by eGold. But ALGO's pretty close. It's, I think, number 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, it's number 7 from the top. So basically the 7th lowest short-term UDPI that's here. And that's, would be good news from a relative perspective. That means that kind of relative to a lot of these other assets below it, the model thinks that Algorand has potentially more upside relative to downside right now in the short term than some of these other assets, especially compared to something like Phantom, just sitting up almost at 3. And, that's probably not super surprising given that it's rallied, almost 200% in the last month. So that's something that's useful to watch, because oftentimes what will happen in these bullish phases is you'll have kind of swings where certain assets really run early, then other assets will kind of run after that, then other assets run after that. And a useful thing about the short-term UDPI and be able to compare it across assets is you can get a sense of which ones have maybe put in a lot of their move, or at least their short-term move. Something like, for example, Phantom seems like it's probably put in at least the majority of its shorter-term move and might need to kind of consolidate, cool off before it could put in another big move to the upside. Whereas an asset like ALGO maybe hasn't done that so much. Maybe it hasn't put in such an extreme early move that continuing the rally is unlikely. And in fact, at this kind of level, it's very much plausible that ALGO could stage at least some more upside before having to really start cooling off. And then similar with anything kind of in the lower level. And so we've talked before on the channel about this idea of rotation, that what happens in crypto often in these bullish phases is that people will ride early runners, they'll take profits off of those, and they'll move them into things that haven't run as much. So you might think that it's possible, at least, that some of the money that people are making from some of those earlier runners, those things that are really moving, will find their way, some of the profits will find their way into assets that haven't run as much. And it's possible that ALGO will benefit from that as well, and then be able to start chew up some of that upside as well. Kind of playing that rotation instead of just being a trend chaser, someone who's just FOMOing into Phantom right at the local top, which might not be so ideal. Now, that's no guarantee that Phantom is done here, but looking at this level, I would suspect it probably needs to cool off, where I don't think that's necessarily the case for ALGO looking at this. And so we can also just look at the short-term UDPI for ALGO. So this is our workbench that we have at Clarity Digital at the website. And this is a really powerful tool that lets you visualize historically the different models for the different assets that we have models for across time. So this is the ALGO price in white, and then this is the short-term UDPI here in teal over top of it. And what I wanted to focus on with this chart here was just looking at the recent behavior on the short-term UDPI. You'll actually note that short-term UDPI has been falling off. It's been falling while ALGO's price has actually been rising. And so one of the ways you can read that is that the model likes ALGO more now at the current price of about 26 cents as I record this, more so than it did back when algo was at 24 cents, just about a week ago. And so what that means is that the model is getting a bit more bullish on algo. And so even though price is moving up, it still thinks that there's a greater amount of upside relative to downside potential in the coming kind of days to weeks sort of time frame. And I don't guarantee that that gets realized. You'll notice that these different points can act as resistance for algo before, but you don't have to go all the way up to 3, 4, 5 to be able to find a local top. But what it is saying is that if the broader market remains bullish, and that's a big if and something that you have to watch closely. But if the broader market remains bullish, what it just means is that algo now has more upside relative to downside potential in the estimate of the model, even than it did a week ago at a slightly lower price. And so what I might expect to happen is if algo just kind of consolidates here for a while, kind of stays at a relative level here, it's possible that the short-term UDPI will actually cool off even more, kind of get more bullish on it so that it can then make its next big move to the upside, kind of cool off its short-term risk and then make a bigger move to the upside. Again, all that's conditional on the broader market remaining bullish, but I think there's a reasonable chance of that. And I think algo will be an interesting one to watch to see if it can play catch up with the market, kind of catch up to some of those other assets that have been going a little bit more crazy, like Phantom, for example. So that's the short-term UDPI. The other one I wanted to look at was Momentum Bias Indicator, or MBI. So this is all about momentum. It basically looks at the prevailing momentum in the market. Is it on the bullish side or on the bearish side? And so you'll see that in these bullish phases, you'll get into a positive momentum footing, and then price is just kind of pulled up. Same here. You get into the positive zone, above zero, and then price moves up, and it tends to coincide with these big moves to the upside. Then also at these bearish times, you'll see this very telltale behavior. You're spending most of your time in the red with these attempts to reestablish positive momentum that get rejected to the downside, and then further down you go. Now, what's interesting about what algo's been doing more recently, though, and this is something I've talked about a lot on the channel, is this kind of oscillation around zero, where you're kind of oscillating up and down, down but then up. And what that tends to oftentimes correspond to is this transitionary period out of a bearish phase into potentially a bullish phase. And you see this with every single asset you can look at the MBI for. Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. They have these distinct phases, these distinct bullish phases where you just get into the green, you stay up there for a long time and price just goes parabolic. Then these bearish phases where you get down to the red and you just stay down there for a long time, setting kind of new lows on negative momentum. And that kind of pulls price down to lower and lower levels. But then you eventually get to this kind of period here where you start seeing this type of behavior, which tends to be more in that kind of transitionary period where the worst of the bear market's over. And even if you have to set in a new low, you're starting to kind of see a change in regime where it's not the case that negative momentum is just prevailing constantly all the time, but you're actually getting this kind of fluctuation, which then can give way to these more positive movements. So obviously we'll have to wait for confirmation to see if that's really going to happen. That's going to be dependent on a lot of things going right for crypto, not just the broader crypto market remaining bullish, but also a recession not showing up and tanking risk assets across the board, all those kind of things. But this is what you'd want to see, right? If you're thinking about, is it possible or plausible that algo can put in some reasonable moves to the upside, you'd be much prefer to have seen this kind of behavior on the MBI leading into something like this than you would something like this, where the possibility of it just being a false, a bear market rally that's just going to get rejected to new lows is a lot higher in this kind of context than it is in this kind of context. Not to say it can't happen, right? But it's certainly, if I'm going to put a probability on it, I would say that this looked a lot more, or especially this one here, looked a lot more like a bear market rally than something like this, which maybe possibly is the start of a new accumulation zone. And it's very possible that this is the low for algo. We don't know. We're going to have to wait and see about that. But even if it isn't, it doesn't matter. If this kind of behavior persists on the MBI, it might still mean that we're kind of entering a new phase, even if price does set in a new low before ultimately going back up. So not financial advice, of course. You should make of these data as you will, interpret them as you will. But I think it's something that's useful to point out. And algo is not the only one doing this. A bunch of crypto assets are now starting to show this behavior, which makes it more plausible that we might be entering a transition out of the bear phase, or at least the worst of the bear phase, into accumulation before a potential bull phase later on. So the final thing that I just wanted to talk about as well for algo, just kind of another point for the bulls, is if we look at our trend model, or one of our trend models here, at Polarity Digital, and this is one that I've talked a lot about here. It's a model I created a while ago. This is the market direction classifier, or MDC, and basically what it's trying to do is identify critical levels at which when price gets above it, that's bullish, and when price is below it, that tends to be bearish. And so that's what this teal line is. And what I've done is I've just color coded so that above that line is green, below that line is red, just to kind of help the visualization. And we'll see is that oftentimes when you can break above the MDC critical level, you can have these pretty explosive moves to the upside. Now, not always. Sometimes they're more modest, and sometimes there are these kind of fake out points. But one thing I did just want to mention is the nice thing about the MDC is even when you do get these fake outs where it comes up, the model thinks that it's possible new uptrend is forming, but then it gets rejected to the downside. Here the MDC would have gotten you in if you just bought at the level. It would have flipped bullish at 79 cents, would have gotten you out at about 82. So you wouldn't have lost money. You actually would have made a little bit. Same thing with some of these ones down here where get you in at 32 cents, get you out at around 33 cents. It's basically flat through that time. And so essentially these fake outs aren't really going to be costing that much, but then it can also oftentimes catch these big moves to the upside. And this is not just for algo, this is for basically all the different assets. You go look at them, you're going to see that this kind of behavior, that the MDC is very good at catching early on these big explosive moves to the upside, and it helps to get you in for the best of the bull market and then out for the worst of the bear market, as you see down through here. And so we can see that we've flipped the MDC critical level all the way back at 20 cents, and we're now currently sitting all the way up at or algo's price is sitting up about 26 cents currently now. So not a huge move from there to there, 20 to 26, but not bad. And certainly if algo goes for a bigger run, like something like this, that would be a more impressive move. It's still too early to know, but that's what's happened so far. And so we're going to have to watch this. You'll see that the MDC is a dynamic model. You see it's actually, the critical level is ticking up. So it was 20 cents back here. It's about 22 cents right now. It's going to, kind of be dynamically changing that range. And if algo were to fall below that critical level, then the model would flip bearish, and it's possible we might see another leg down. But so far, so good, basically. So as long as we stay above that critical level line, the model thinks that a bullish disposition on algo is reasonable. So again, not financial advice, you should make of that as you will. Just wanted to point that out as well. So the final point that I wanted to make about algo, though, is let's just imagine the bull case comes true, especially the longer term bull case. Let's imagine, looking at the MBI, that this really is a turn in the corner. And let's just imagine that this was the bottom at about 16.6 cents all the way back here in December. Let's just imagine that that's true. The question then that a lot of people are going to be asking is, can we just go back up and not only revisit the all-time highs, but break above it? How plausible is that? And one of the things that's tempting when you look at a price chart like algo is you look and see how it got there before, that algo is able to get, above 2 cents. So, in terms of daily closes, its high was $2.38 more or less. It can be tempting to look at this chart and say, okay, so if it did it in the past, it should be just as easy for it to do it again. That, basically the context should be very much the same. If we made it before, we can make it again. In fact, it should be easy for us just to clear off into totally new all-time highs. Well, it's possible that we'll be able to just do that, and it won't really seem any more difficult than before. But one of the things that's really important to keep in mind with something like algo is that things have changed to some degree. And one of the things that has changed is the circulating supply of algo from back at those points where it was making its all-time high. We're currently sitting at about 72.2 billion algo that's in circulation. And if we go look at the circulating supply of algo, so I did this over here in TradingView. I basically just divided the algo market cap by the algo price, which would then give us an estimate of the circulating supply. Because again, market cap is price times circulating supply. So by taking market cap and dividing by price, you're getting back to circulating supply. And one of the things that you can see is that algo has been really exploding in the amount of circulating supply that's out there. All the way back here in 2019, it wasn't even at 1 billion. It was at around 200 million. Back at this first jump up here. Now we're currently sitting at 7.2 billion. And in that whole run that we had, that whole bull market that we had going up into the kind of summer fall of 2021. Actually, let me pull back. I'll pull back this chart over here. This run back up until this point. So basically this entire bull move up here, up until around this point here, we can see that the highest that the circulating supply was about 3.1 billion. Now we're over double that. So what that means is that for Algo to go on another run and to reclaim those higher prices, it's having to do it in the face of there being more supply available to be sold. So basically the more possibility of sell pressure, because the fewer of Algo that you have, kind of the less Algo that there are to sell. And so, basic supply and demand dynamics would entail that X amount of demand at a lower amount of supply should equal a higher price than that same amount of demand at a higher number of supply. That's what it would entail. Now, obviously, it's more complicated than that. It's possible, although I don't think likely, but it's possible that even though the circulating supply is increased by this much, there'd be, billions of Algo that people are just not going to touch and they wouldn't sell no matter what the price is, in which case you'd still be in a context like this. I don't really take that as my base case. I think people probably would start selling, if price really started to catapult. And so the context is now different. There's a lot more circulating supply in Algo. And this is also very apparent if you just look at the Algo market cap. You'll notice that the market cap looks very different than the price. Prices are back down at the same levels they were back around here currently. Whereas if you look at market cap, it's way above that level. And the reason is because the circulating supply is so much higher. That basically for any given price of Algo, market cap is now going to be higher than it was back here because you're multiplying it by a much larger number, the much larger circulating supply that's out there. And so if we're asking the question, can Algo go back to all-time highs? Sure. But what it probably means is that there's going to need to be a greater demand for Algo than there was back in this run up here. That's, I think, what has to be the base case from that dynamic. Unless you think that about 3 billion Algo, or actually more, 4 billion Algo, are never going to be sold no matter what happens to price. If that was the case, then the actual amount of Algo that would potentially be sold would be the same as what was back here, about 3 billion. I don't take that as my base case, though. I think that there's probably going to be a lot of that would hit the market as price would go up. And so what it just means is that for Algo to go back and reclaim all-time highs, we'll probably need appreciably more demand for Algo to get there. Now, is that possible? Absolutely, right? If Algo can really start to, get a lot of use cases out there, kind of create new demand sources for Algo, more reasons for people to get into it, especially beyond just what was mostly driving things back here, which is mostly just hype and speculation, then it's very much possible. It's very much possible that could happen. But to make that your base case, you kind of have to watch what's going on, and are those use cases being actually implemented? Are they actually coming to pass? And then how likely is for that to happen? And so I think there are different ways that you can look at Algo. You can look at it as a short-term play, a short-term kind of swing trade, which would be more about looking at things like the short-term UDPI and things like that to kind of identify good entrances, potential exits if more swing trading strategy is involved. But if you're looking more at the macro perspective, if Algo is moving into a new bull phase, then the question you have to say is, okay, how high do you think that could take us? Will that take us to new all-time highs? Will we find a top somewhere below it? Because there's certainly plenty of precedent in the crypto market of assets having put in impressive rallies in an initial bull market, but then failing to break that all-time high in a subsequent bull market. XRP, Litecoin are great examples of that, where they, in the 2018 market, or 2018 top, they set in their all-time highs and they didn't end up breaking that in the 21, 22 kind of bull market, or really 21 market. And so really with Algo, then you'd have to ask your question, is Algo going to be another one of those in the next bull market, or will it be able to move above? And one of the things that's kind of working against Algo to some degree is that the circulating supply is so much larger now than it was back here. But if you think that there's going to be an increase in demand that's going to be so much greater that can then overcome that increase in circulating supply, that might not be a concern. That is a determination I'll leave up to you to make, because I think there's a lot of assumptions you'll have to make, and really, I'm not going to tell you one way or the other which way to believe. I think that's something that you have to make a decision for yourself. But it's something that's important to be aware of for something like Algo, which has seen a lot of inflation in its circulating supply relative to some other assets. Something like Bitcoin right now, its inflation rate is quite low. Ethereum actually has currently a negative inflation rate. And so, different assets will have different considerations based on some of those factors. But Algo is one that has seen a lot of inflation. Now, a lot of inflation is behind it, which is the good news, but there is still some more to come. And so you want to kind of keep that in mind as you're looking not only at Algo, but any crypto asset. What are the tokenomics? What is the circulating supply and the schedule of a release for that circulating supply? Again, for Algo, the worst of it is over. This jump over here really coincided with when they kind of accelerated their vesting to some of the early backers. And then that really exploded the circulating supply. But by doing that, they kind of reduced the amount of inflation that would happen after that. But again, it's not totally done. There's more Algo before it's going to reach its kind of max supply. but it is something to keep an eye on. And I did just want to make that point in this video because it's something I don't see a ton of people talking about, not just for algo, but other assets as well. But something that's critically important to watch because it can really change how price can reasonably be expected to move in the future, especially if you're just assuming equal demand from some other bullish point in the past. All right, obviously none of this is financial advice, and I strongly recommend you go and check out Polarity Digital to look at not only our indicators for algo, but for a bunch of other crypto assets that are in the space. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like and follow us on Twitter. A lot of updates about it.